Our speaker is Irene Lens-Fernández from Department of English and German Studies at University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Today, she presents her talk on the topic Unspeakable Desires, Maternal Love, Guilt, and Subjectivity in Mary Dorcey's When You're Asleep. Irene Lens-Fernández is a PhD candidate at Universidade de Santiago de Compostela in Spain. She has been exploring the phenomenon of intermediality in contemporary digital cultural products by focusing on how literary references act as meaning constitutional strategies. She is studying the concept of liminality in connection to contemporary posthuman and eco-critical debates, especially within the realm of weird fiction and film. Her research interests also include discourses of identity and the nature-culture divide. Today, she will give a talk on the topic, Unspeakable Desires, Maternal Love, Guilt, and Subjectivity in Mary Dorcey's When You're Asleep.
Thank you so much for listening to my talk. I know these are terrible hours. And I would also like to thank the organizers for their work, for giving me the opportunity to present at this conference. Well, as you can see on the screen, my presentation will delve into the notion of maternal love. And more specifically, it will deal with the representation of this type of love in a particular poem by Mary Dorcey. And this poem is entitled When You're Asleep, and it's included in the collection Moving into the Space Cleared by Our Mothers. In her poetry and also in her fiction, she privileges women's experience. She openly talks about themes that until recently were considered to be completely unfit for the literary realm. For example, homoerotic relationships between women, desire, the women's body, or the complexities of the relationships between mothers and daughters, which is my focus, the focus of my presentation. We should take into account that she was already writing about these issues in the Irish society of the 90s, so I find it to be quite transgressive. Before delving into the analysis of the poem, I'm going to contextualize it a little bit, just in case you are not acquainted with the work. When You're Asleep presents the relationship between a mother and a daughter. The opening stanzas lead the readers to believe that the poetic voice is that of a mother who is continually looking after her child. However, as the poem progresses, the reader realizes that the poetic voice is actually a daughter taking care of her aging mother, who in her last stages of life resembles a little child who is in constant need of help. So the poem sort of tricks you into thinking that a mother is talking about her child, but a reversal of roles is confirmed by the end of the poem, when the daughter remembers her childhood, during which, of course, the caregiver and protective figure was her mother and not the other way around. And this is the moment when the daughter recognizes herself in the figure of the mother. In order to analyze the poem, I have revised various works on the topic of motherhood, and in the remaining slides, I will address primarily the work of Adrienne Rich, where she explores the concepts of institutional and experiential motherhood. Very roughly speaking, the concept of institutional motherhood refers to the societal and cultural expectations, norms, and structures surrounding motherhood. It encompasses the roles and responsibilities assigned to mothers by society, often shaped by traditional gender roles and expectations, and it limits women's identity and subjectivity. On the other hand, experiential motherhood, which is the one that Rich defends, refers to the personal, to the lived experiences of motherhood as felt by individual women. It involves the emotional, psychological, and physical aspects of being a mother, focusing on the personal relationships and connections between a mother and her children. So her work, as well as many others on the topic, highlights the importance of addressing maternal love and motherhood within the academia and revising presumably fixed or essential aspects of maternal experience on subjectivity, which is basically social constructs. So delving into the analysis of When You're Asleep, the first thing that I would like to note is the pervasive feeling of exhaustion that the poetic voice, that is the daughter, expresses. As you can see on the screen, in the opening line, the poetic voice states that she is worn out with her mother/child. And this is a phrase that is repeated 2 more times throughout the poem, which is not very long, by the way. So the daughter's tiredness is emphasized by these and by all the formal features and poetic techniques like enjambments. In my opinion, enjambments suggest that the daughter has to take care of her mother without interruption, in the same way that a poetic line continues to the next one without any kind of grammatical pause. This feeling of being out of breath, of not having time to pause when reading, might even make us sympathize with the poetic voice's exhaustion. There are also lexical choices that emphasize this idea of tiredness. For example, at a given time, the poetic persona says that the hours do not simply pass, but instead they journey. And of course, journey entails is a process that entails a long period of time. When at last the obligations are over because the mother/child is sleeping, the daughter feels free to enjoy herself. Significantly enough, as you can see on the screen again, a long dash appears in the poem after the words like over and free. This is emphasized by the title. Only when the mother is asleep, not actually present, the daughter feels free. If we approach this in Freudian terms, the dashes could be seen as a visual representation of the unconscious, of repressed thoughts, or of voids depicting operations in the mind that cannot be represented by ordinary language. It is as though the daughter possessed more thoughts which are too improper or too distressing to verbalize, as though a feeling of relief from her mother's continuous needs was not something that she should be feeling. I think that these guilty feelings are beautifully expressed all throughout Rich's work, and we have one example on the screen. Rich writes that she felt like, and I'm quoting, a monster of selfishness and intolerance, just for being after hours and hours of taking care of her children, and understandably so. She says, and I quote again, their voices wear away at my nerves. The constant needs fill me with despair at my own failures, despair too at my fate, which is to serve a function for which I was not fitted. There are times when I feel only death will free us from one another. End of quote. And I want to highlight the sentence, a function for which I was not fitted, because I think that the reversal of roles in the poem, whereby the daughter becomes rather by force the caretaker, emphasizes the fact that many women do not choose to become mothers, but rather they feel destined to it. And even if they choose to become mothers, they are not born, of course, knowing how to unmistakably take care of their children. This, according to Rich, is one of the unexamined assumptions that we have to revise. So we also have to revise the idea that women can't be fulfilled just by acting out the traditional and patriarchal division of labor and by being just mothers and housewives, what Friedan called the feminine mistake, for example. And we need to revise the assumption that a mother, by needing time for herself, is a monster and is not loving her children unconditionally, in contraposition to the ideal angel of the house. So this idea of institutional motherhood has been imposed on women and internalized by many women who have been made to believe that their subjectivity is defined and limited to being a mother. In Lens-Fernández's own words, taken from the life of the user, we have to distinguish the biological from the cultural. We have to distinguish what is natural from what is ideologically and socially constructed, but rendered as natural. Therefore, the institutional form of motherhood perpetuates patriarchal and socially constructed ideas about maternal love that perpetuate feelings of guilt and despair in many women nowadays. Besides, in the poem, the fact that the mother becomes the child and stops being the caretaker also subverts the essentialist notion of motherhood as something permanent or fixed. So the identity of the poetic voice, as that of all women, cannot be reduced simply to her maternal function, and her love cannot be equally measured only by positive emotions, denying the darker or more frightening emotions that loving a child or a mother might entail. These are obscured by the ideal discourse of institutional motherhood that raises expectations as to the emotions a mother is supposed to feel, the most prevalent one, of course, being selfless, unconditional love at all times. In conclusion, we could say that writers like Dorcey and Rich show women the value of their own experiences and the importance of addressing previously considered taboo topics. And I'm talking about the Irish society of the 90s, not today, thankfully. Previously considered taboo topics like these. And I think that representation in literature might liberate mothers and women who are not mothers from the constraints, impositions, and the burden of responsibility that the traditional culturally ingrained discourse and imagery have forced us to internalize. So this might open the path to embrace natural feelings of exhaustion, self-love, and even anger without feeling guilty and without feeling that our love diminishes for experiencing those kinds of emotions. So thank you again for your time, and I would likely welcome any question or comment that you may have, even by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene. Gracias. And thank you for being so well in time. So we have a couple of minutes to discuss these issues with Irene, if you feel like. Go ahead, please. Yes, the question is, how do you see the younger or youngest generation's vision on motherhood nowadays? Could you say something about that?
Okay, thank you for your question. It's very interesting, I think. I think I'm not quite entitled to answer this properly because it's not my field of studies. But I would just say my own opinion. I think that thankfully times are changing, and works like Rich and literary representations like Dorcey's can help mothers nowadays to kind of distance themselves from the role models that they have observed all their lives, which is great to have a sacrificing mother doing everything for her children, but we also have to think of them as individuals that have a life outside that life of being with their children and caring for them. And I think the younger generations are realizing that they can be both a mother and a working figure and a role model and someone else besides that. But I think that guilty feelings still pervade. And I don't think that has actually a solution, because we will always be feeling guilty if we leave our children at home when we have to work. But I think it's something that we have to address and make women see that it's natural.
Okay, thank you. This is certainly a topic which will go on reverberating during our conference. Thank you, Irene. I have one more request from Mashri.
Could we go back to your slide about the three transgressive themes?
Could you go back to one of your slides? Which slide, Mashri?
Sure.
Which slide do you want to see?
In the beginning, you showed the slide with three transgressive.
The third slide, you mean?
Yeah.
The third one? Okay, this one?
No, there was this with three themes where you talked about female.
With the three themes about female transgressive things.
Second or third slide.
Oh, yeah. This one?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the question, Mashri?
And my question is that, and I'm a psychologist, and from my point of view, female physicality is sort of understood as transgressive, and then also homoerotic relationships between women are also sort of transgressive. But mother-daughter relations have been covered so much in literature, in many disciplines of humanities and social sciences. Will you still regard it as a transgressive topic in line with the other two? For me, it's little controversial.
Did you hear the question, Irene?
No, sorry.
Did you
No.
hear it? Did you hear it?
I heard it, but I don't know whether I understood it. It's the mother-daughter relationship, and your question is whether Irene still considers it transgressive? Okay.
In line with the other two.
In line with the other two.
The other two are
Yeah.
understood as transgressive from my point of view,
Okay.
as a psychologist, and from my positionality.
All right. Irene, brief answer because our time is running out.
But
Go ahead.
I don't really hear it. Like, the thing you want to know is if I consider the three topics transgressive, like the mother-daughter relationship.
The third
transgressive in
one,
relation to
Marjorie
the
is
other.
saying.
Only the third one.
Only the third one.
On the third, okay. I don't think that mother-daughter relationship is transgressive, and I don't think it was. I think that the transgressive part is the way, the representation of that relationship, because a mother-daughter relationship can be anywhere, and it's ranging from the beginning of literature to nowadays. But the way she touched upon those issues, thinking about, I think I'll be better off if you were just asleep and I could be doing my life. So there are impulses of infanticide as well in rich work. So I think that is the transgressive part. The fact that this ideal love, mother love, is not so ideal. We have darker instances, and that is the one that is not being so much addressed in academia.
Okay, that seems to be very clear now. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Irene.
Thank you so
again.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this session.